I might change my mind if I had to think on it for significantly longer, but right now it really does feel like Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald was the worst movie I saw in 2018, especially when weighted against the pedigree of its franchise, the talent involved, and the sheer amount of money being shoved into its production. And as a nice change of pace, audiences seem to kind of agree and acknowledge it this time. I mean, it made money, but definitely not what they were looking for it to make, and I was far from the only critic who kicked the shit out of it this time. Hell, last time I saw a studio throw this much money behind the long-term plans of a mega franchise without stopping to ask, did anyone actually want this? Only to get thuddingly rebuked in both reviews and dollars or lack thereof, it was,
why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name!
Yeah. Couple of crummy years at Warner Brothers. And if you think about it, you can actually kind of blame the Harry Potter movies for all of this, thanks to the now rather definitively proven impossible to replicate circumstances of having a huge youth literature phenomenon getting big, staying big, being enthusiastically endorsed as actually good for kids and tremendously merchandise-friendly, sticking the landing, getting a massively complex undertaking of a long-term movie deal launched, executed, and also sticking the landing in the same relative time frame. Warner Brothers basically went a full decade with this one constantly releasing franchise and the occasional Batman movie, underwriting everything else the studio wanted to do, and ever since that series concluded, they've been frantically flailing around trying to cobble together a replacement, some other new long-term thing that can just float there in the expense ledger, earning $1 billion at the box office every year just by existing. Hence why they went whole hog on the DC Extended Universe before waiting to find out how audiences would actually receive Zack Snyder's interesting take on that material.
Stop! Stop! He's already dead!
Only to learn that the answer was, yeah, no, we're good. We like the hot chick who ties people up and the mermaid guy, though. More of those, maybe. So plan B is apparently, well, okay, let's just make more Harry Potter movies, with the complication being that J.K. Rowling has to sign off on anything they might want to do with the property, and it's not like they can just get the characters people care about back for more, not even to do like a movie of that cursed child thing, mostly because I'm pretty sure Daniel Radcliffe's automated outgoing message for when anyone from Warner Brothers calls is just the sound of Daniel Radcliffe's iPhone sinking to the bottom of the ocean. And they can't even really do prequels like Star Wars did, because anything genuinely interesting and a worth building a whole movie around sense about the backstory has already been covered in the movies they already made. So instead, we're watching a studio embarrass itself, hammering together an entire new franchise out of lightweight retcons, deep lore Wikipedia entries, and an Eddie Redmayne character who's kind of tertiary to the already completely tertiary stuff. And the only thing about it that really impresses me is that the bad filmmaking may have actually managed to blow this all up before the problem of the actual material being not very good did the job. I mean, look, J.K. Rowling has like $1 billion out of this, so what the hell do I even know? And I feel like it's bad karma to talk smack about other writers in general, but like pretty much all of the broader mythology stuff in the Harry Potter franchise that isn't in the direct orbit of the Wizard School and the principal cast of kids and teachers from the main books really seems to suck, right? Like a lot. But that was never really that huge of a deal before, because the franchise and the whole main story is about the kid going to a school and a reinvention of the very specific British juvenile literary tradition of the boarding school melodrama. The school functioned pretty perfectly as a closed universe narrative ecosystem to let that story and its themes play to a satisfying conclusion, with the notion of what was going on in the broader outside world really only needing to intrude when it served a specific dramatic purpose. And if the outlines of that outside world and its history didn't always totally line up or fit together coherently, it didn't matter, because that's not what the goddamn story was about. It was about the kid going to the Wizard School and gradually finding himself by even more gradually understanding that figuring out where he came from and the circumstances of his parents' background weren't necessarily going to solve all of his problems, and the audience also learned, hey, getting to escape your shitty abusive normie family in crap-ass town for an awesome school for special people is a lovely fantasy, but also higher ed is still a viper pit of elitism, so keep your head on a swivel. Like, that was all very good stuff. Thematically, narrative, all worked. That's why it was so successful. Which is why it's almost incredible to note, even to me, who was not necessarily the biggest devotee of all things Harry Potter, why was just send different kids to the goddamn Wizard School not the first idea they went with for sequels? I mean, wasn't like 90% of the reason this whole thing captured the imaginations of young readers and eventually filmgoers to begin with the fantasy of, ooh, Wizard School, that sounds like a cool place to go? Isn't that what they've been merchandising and hyping and building that whole theme park around, fulfilling pieces of that specific fantasy? I'm gonna go shop in the place they buy school supplies. Let's go see the classrooms. I wonder which house that talking hat would say I belong in and what it says about my personality. Look, clearly it's not what J.K. Rowling wanted them to do for sequels because, you know, it's kind of obvious because they're not doing it, but this does seem like both the easiest call to make and also the only one that makes any real sense short of maybe let it rest a while and make movies about other stuff. Does it not? Am I nuts here? Because it seems like all the problems and complications and weird unforced errors this franchise keeps running into in terms of like changing culture, diversity, casting, weak committed to Johnny Depp and now everyone's finally sick of him, all of that would be fairly easily solved in the context of, hey, welcome back to Hogwarts, that place you like. Here's 3 or 4 new kids, or maybe just 1 to start, since we're not wedded to a bunch of books that have already been written this time, and we can just change things up based on what people seem to like, or whatever. Point is, we're gonna do the cool stuff again, like the train and the hat and the brooms and the potions, all the stuff you like, and we're gonna have teachers that didn't die come back, plus a new one. Wait, what's that? No, it's not just gonna be the same story again, because these are different kids. Maybe one of them is a pain in the ass who skateboards and causes shenanigans. Maybe a kid who's super hardcore into the Quidditch, and you just do that for the whole arc of the movie instead of it just being a subplot, like Mighty Ducks style. Maybe there's a vampire. Wait, hold on. Vampires? Are vampires a thing in Harry Potter? They are, okay. Maybe there's a vampire. That's a thing you could do for one movie. I mean, anything has to be more interesting than following the great aunts and uncles of the supporting cast through a weird conspiracy story that's the prequel to the backstory to the main plot we already knew the ending to and already know none of this stuff is important in.
No offense, but I really don't care.
They were supposed to make 5 more of these goddamn Fantastic Beast things. Apparently that's still the plan, but after the way Grindelwald was received, I'm hoping the minor buzz that they'll think twice and wrap it all up in the next one turns out to be true, because if I am going to be stuck in film criticism for a while longer, I'd at least prefer to not be staring down the barrel of too many more of these things. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.